This is Tony Chimmel, and I'd like to introduce the hosts of the Game Marks podcast, George Feis and Johnny Clash. Welcome to the Game Marks podcast. For each and every week, we do a deep dive into the good, the bad, and the awesome of all things wrestling video games. My name is George Feis.
And I'm the man they call Johnny Clash. Today we are playing Championship Wrestling. Will it get a rating of Play It Forever or Future Endeavor? Also, the debut of GMP 24 this week on YouTube and a whole lot more.
And as always, please make sure to subscribe and leave a 5-star rating and a review for this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you choose to listen to your podcast. And make sure to follow along on all forms of social media at Game Marks Pod. And don't forget, you can get early and ad-free episodes of this show, access to show notes, the live recordings, and a whole lot more over at our Patreon, patreon.com/GameMarksPod. Johnny Clash, how are you doing? You still playing Supercard?
What's up? I dabbled a little bit. It's a lot of fun for a couple minutes. I saw that some places where the average was like maybe 10-15 minutes only.
You had a really good phrase long ago when we played a phone game, and the long and short of it was it's a good bathroom break game. But you had a good name for it, and that's really what Supercard is. You can dive in, get like a match or two in during a break, and then
it's a game for the shitter.
Yeah.
Now, we said last week one of my main issues was all my cards were gone. They're just not there anymore. And a few of our listeners said they experienced the same thing where their collection was just nuked somewhere in the middle. I don't know if that's their way of getting rid of old cards. I don't know if it's like a save error where you had to do something. But it was weird that when I tried to get my cards, the options were there for Discord and Twitch to log into for a save. I don't remember that being there years ago.
No, I don't either.
I definitely signed in with like Google Play or my Google email address. That wasn't there.
Google Game Center or whatever it was called.
Yeah, that wasn't even an option anymore. So maybe they just got rid of that and that's where everybody lost their stuff. I don't know. But it still holds up as one of the better and longest reigning WWE mobile games out there. So I'm sure people are going to play it. We actually got a funny tweet reply about it yesterday. Jordan said, "You aren't missing much on WWE Supercard. The game has so many scammers using hacked cheap credits. The game has become trash. I know I've played it all 10 years. I'm at the top level." So I guess there's also like a little scamming ring going on with Supercard.
Interesting. Of all the games to have that, I wouldn't have thought that Supercard would be the one to have it. But here we are. Very, very interesting. But
I don't know how that works, but yeah.
You announced something earlier. Let's talk about it now. GMP 24 starts this Wednesday. For those of you who may have been fans, may have been aware, a couple years ago, John and I had a show. It was called GMP 64, where we did a little fantasy booking and had a television show that we made in No Mercy. And we had pay-per-views on Twitch and everything. And all of that is available currently on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/GameMarksPod. But we got a little itchy.
It was a lot of work.
But we got a little itchy. We kind of missed that creative outlet. So we decided that we're going to bring it back. But we kind of wanted it to be a little bit, I don't know.
Easier?
Yeah.
Streamlined?
Easier, a little more already built into the game that we were playing and less of a manual process. So we decided to bring it back up. Now we're calling it GMP 24, and we are doing the same thing. Making a weekly television show, but this time in WWE 2K24. And the thought is that show name will change. It will be GMP 24 with 2K24, and then GMP 25 with 2K25, and keep going and going and going.
So on and so on.
Yeah. So we are back, weekly show on our YouTube channel. The idea is to do it every Wednesday. And yeah, short, digestible, a lot of fun.
Just having fun in WWE 2K universe mode. That's all it is. We drafted rosters, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So go check it out on YouTube. Subscribe now. We just hit 800 subscribers. We're on the road to 1,000, and that's pretty cool.
Hell yeah.
But we have another thing to announce. We mentioned a few weeks ago about Pod Exchange, which is going to be us. It's going to be Going Postal. It's going to be State of Affairs, the brand new show, which is already causing controversy all over the world. And that is going to drop the Big Podcast Network on Patreon May 1st. So on May 1st, our Patreon is going to change over to Pod Exchange. There's going to be new tiers involved. And hey, sign up. You might like something. There's going to be a show for everybody.
I would say new tiers, new content, new everything. Really, it's going to be content from all 3 shows you heard John mention earlier, and something unique, something for everybody. You can get involved with the different shows. It'll be live watch-alongs of stuff, monthly roundtables. It'll be great, and we're very excited to be a part of Pod Exchange and to be a part of it with our good buddies Swoggle and Shoes. But John, are you ready to put on those nostalgia goggles and go all the way back to the faraway land of 1986?
I wasn't even born yet.
You ready to go?
I'm ready. Looking to add the newest wrestling figures to your lineup? There's no better spot to pick up your next figure than the Wrestling Collector Shop.
Started by collectors for collectors around the globe, Wrestling Collector Shop has been serving the fans the latest and greatest in wrestling action figures since 2002. So the next time you're looking for the newest wrestling collectible to add to your collection, make sure to go to WrestlingCollectorShop.com and use code GameMarks to save yourself 10% on your order.
That's 10% off your order with code GameMarks at WrestlingCollectorShop.com.
All right, the deep dive is sponsored by our friends over at Wrestling Collector Shop. Make sure to use code GameMarks to save yourself 10% over at WrestlingCollectorShop.com.
I just did.
Absolutely. Now, Championship Wrestling, released in 1986 for the Apple II computer, the Atari ST, the Commodore 64, and the Commodore 16. This game is, by all definition, it is a early 80s PC wrestling game. It is like, it looks like it sounds like it, we've played some of them on the podcast earlier, and this is right in line. Like, it doesn't miss a beat. It is cookie cutter graphics, the same way that you would expect from this generation of consoles. And if these are the kinds of games that you grew up playing, you probably love them. And if you did not, there's a good chance that this may not be the right game for you. But that being said, there is a very, very large group that feel like this game is it. Championship Wrestling, developed in North America by Epix and in Europe by US Gold, published by Free Radical Software, and for the Commodore 16 by Octasoft, and other wrestling games in 1986. You've got
WWE 2K86.
Yes, Pro Wrestling for the Sega Master System, which still may go down as one of the weirdest wrestling game covers we've ever covered.
Do you still have the one I gave you?
Somewhere. I believe it is in the to be displayed tote when I have a nice wrestling
that
spot.
Came from my friend Juba. Everybody knows Juba. Everybody loves Juba. Pro wrestling of the Northeast circuit.
The pro wrestler Juba.
Yeah, the pro wrestler Juba, featured on Impractical Jokers. But let's talk about this game right now. The description says, and now we proudly present the Sultans of Slam, the champs of chokes, the meanest, nastiest, foulest fighters the canvas has ever seen. We bring to you the guys who use every dirty trick known to man and a few that aren't. Take on any 8 rowdy wrestlers, each with his own individual style when it comes to busting heads. So that's what this game's all about. So when you load into this game, you get there are a lot of mismatches here. So The game itself, from the cover we saw, we're going to go through the covers a bit later. There's one on
that's
Wikipedia.
The thing I have the most questions about.
Yeah, there's one on Wikipedia right now. That's the Commodore 16 cover. It looks like Danny DeVito choking King Kong Bundy or something. But then the actual cover features 2 wrestlers from in the game, and it just has the big Championship Wrestling logo, which is way ahead of its time, and like a really nice logo.
Looks
for
great.
Yeah, like it's for 1986. That's crazy.
Yeah. And it's like a nice little marquee, and yeah, it's beautiful.
But then when you load into the actual game, it looks like Ric Flair's greeting you with a title belt that says Epics. There's a lot of just mismatched pieces here, and the characters themselves look completely different than.
And that's all the same, like across the board for all of these consoles. You may have the same game, and it may play the same, but you're gonna get different graphics and I don't know, the interface. It's hard. There's not really like an interface. It's just you just play the game.
It's actually very Mario-esque. Yeah. I'm saying Mario, not Mario. Very Mario-esque, where it's like the black screen, the white writing. Like it looks like you're underground going after Bowser.
Yeah, and there's a certain level of charm to that when, you know, this is from an age where everything didn't need to be over the top, and like this was as over the top as it could be. I mean, when we talk about this roster and the changes from how they look in their sprites to how they look in the character select screen to how they look in their little chat bubble heads, like it's all very, very different.
Yeah, and it also is very like nice, bright, and colorful because it is on a home computer system, not the Nintendo where you're getting everything is like pink and teal. So it is a little bit nicer there, and it's cool. Even back then, they were like, "Oh, PC's better than console" in 1986. So everybody knew that guy. You know who that guy was? Jerry Seinfeld, because he's the only guy on TV that had an Apple computer sitting there. Was it an Apple computer? He had a computer sitting there.
I definitely know that he had the computer sitting in the corner of the next to the window. But
yeah, I could
weird
be wrong.
Things that you just remember. Wild.
You have no idea. I pull stuff out every day that people are like, "How do you even know?" Like commercials, shows. Like I remember everything.
What's your go-to commercial like jingle?
What? Mr. Bucket, of course.
Sing
it.
Nah.
He said nah. Anyway, your game modes here in this game, you have practice mode, which is always good, especially a game like this for us to play at this day and age. We're used to the 2Ks where you have a million different controls, but a simple game like this might throw us for a loop, but your practice mode will take care of all of that. You have competition, which is where you're going through the roster, and then you have your world records where it's always weird to me when a wrestling game keeps score. But you can actually get a high score in this wrestling game because it is arcade style, which is kind of weird, but it works. I was actually wondering that as we were playing it. I'm seeing the score above the health bar, and I'm like, "Oh, what's that for?" And then I realized the timer's going down, and there's no options here. So
every match is a beat the clock.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that when the clock goes down, it's just whoever has the best score wins.
Which honestly, if you think about it, is kind of a little Mario-esque.
That and a little bit of a cop-out. If you don't want to pin the guy, you just run around the ring after you have a better score. But
who does that?
I don't know who does that.
No,
but let's talk about this roster here. Because I actually think the roster screen, the roster in general, looks pretty damn cool. So you want me to take you through?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So you have... The first guy is KC Colossus, who just looks like a bald Hulk Hogan without the side pieces of the hair. You have Purple Haze, that's Hays, who a little warlordy, but in purple.
Yeah.
Then you have Colonel Ruski, who is Iron Sheikish, I guess you could say. P. Vicious, not Perry Von Vicious of the Blitzkrieg Pro.
I think it's Prince Vicious.
Prince Vicious. Well, it just says P. Vicious here.
I know.
He looks like Tomba. He's in all pink. Then you have Xanto Claus, not Santa Claus or Santa Claus. Xanto Claus, one word, doesn't resemble Santa Claus in the slightest bit. He's actually a luchador with a blue and red mask.
No, he does not.
Funny. Zeke Weasel, who I guess could be like a cross between Macho Man and Hillbilly Jim.
Yeah, it kind of looks like the third Godwin.
Yeah. If Macho Man joined the Godwins.
Yeah.
Berserker, who is the guy on the cover.
I say Berserker that looks like a different face-painted Berserker.
Yeah, he's definitely the guy on the cover because you can tell from the green paint and the green attire.
Yep.
I don't know. Little Road Warrior-ish. Not totally, but kinda.
Is it? It's hard to. So I'm as you're going through the roster, I'm also looking at the portraits that they use for the pre-match promos, and it is very clearly an X, like just a giant green X on his face. It's not anything. It's not a mask. It's not supposed to be something else. It's just like DX spray painted an X on this guy's face.
Then there is H Manslayer. Now, if I scroll down a little bit, I have a screenshot here of Howling Manslayer. On the actual screen, it looks like on the roster select screen, it looks like maybe like a Kerry Von Erich type wrestler, like pretty generic in tights, but then it's actually a Native American wrestler.
Yeah.
So, again, some things just don't really add up in this game, I guess, but it works.
It's all over the place, but in the most 1986 possible way of the word.
I think it's actually, they're cool. Like the sprites look.
Oh, the sprites look great.
Even though they're all exactly the same body type, the same.
I never understood I'm gonna make the gesture with my hand because I don't know how to actually explain it. Where they do this. Like, every character is staggered.
Oh, I guess just to fit the type in on the small screen.
Just 2 lines. Just do 2 lines.
I don't know the capabilities of the Apple II. I mean, it's a floppy disk. What do you expect? Let's take a quick break.
Some instances, it's a tape cartridge, like roll it with a pencil, like a cassette tape.
Yeah, some of them are. Let's take a quick break, come back, talk about the artwork here. All right, we briefly touched on it earlier, and we're in the era where computer graphics are not as prominent, I don't really know. Like, let's do the search I love to search. Photoshop 1986. Like, was it a thing? Let's see. Photoshop was developed in 87. And it was licensed by Adobe in 88. So I don't know. We don't know how they made this, but it does look like a painting. You have, who's this? Berserker getting thrown by KC Colossus with the big Championship Wrestling logo inside a wrestling ring, which looks pretty nice. It looks great. Of the best looking crowds I've seen hand drawn in my lifetime.
It's wild.
It's a very nice cover. It kind of reminds me of that Hulk Hogan game for the Xbox Kinect.
Oh.
Main Event, was that what it's called? Hulk Hogan's Main Event. For some reason, it reminds me of that cover.
Now, do you like... this is a dumb question, because I know the answer. You 100% like the 3D computer-generated version over Danny DeVito with George the Animal Steel in a headlock version.
That's like not a bad version either, to be honest.
I like both. It honestly, my biggest problem is that it looks like it's for 2 different games.
Yeah, that's
like the 3D rendering looking one actually is characters in the game. I don't think either one of the characters on the Commodore 64 cassette are actually in the game.
Yeah, I don't know about that. But the back cover, a lot nicer than some of the covers we get now because it's just full of text, but so is this one. But you actually have screenshots, which a lot of games seem to forget these days. It says, reach out and punch someone You'll have to use your head to win and a few other key body parts as well. And at this point, it might be an excellent time to think about a new career. In all of the screenshots here, and it's got Casey Colossus up in the corner as it shows the text that we read earlier on in the episode. Now, the bullet points here: 8 frothing fighters to play against. Take the role of your favorite. Over 25 bone-crunching, face-mangling, head-pounding moves to enjoy. Throw each other out of the ring. The crowd is a bunch of animals. Move up in the standings until you capture the championship wrestling belt and play against the computer or turn a buddy into putty. Up to 8 players can bash it out, which is also more than we see some games today.
The wordplay alone,
very nice
in the description, it's great. It again, very 80s marketing for video games, and I think that that's one of the things that wrestling games kind of excelled at the time, where it's just like it's over the top, it's crazy, it uses like ridiculous wordplay, like turning your buddy into putty. Like it's fun.
It is fun. I like it a lot. Now, here we have the Atari ST floppy disk. You mentioned earlier that some of these are, you like roll them like a cassette. I know the Commodore 64 is an actual cartridge. So again, these are all going to look different, but all over the place, but we like it. The Danny DeVito cover, it is what it is. I think it's actually designed pretty nicely because it's very cohesive with the back of the game as well, which has kind of the same text and the screenshots.
Could you imagine if it was this front with the back of the other one?
Yeah, I don't know.
But across both covers, the logo stays the same. Even though everything is super cartoony on the Commodore 64, it still has the same logo. It still looks great. It just is a little out of character for the rest of it. It doesn't look quite as cartoony as everything else.
But let's talk about the art style here, and we'll go through the gameplay as well because we didn't really get to that yet. Now, I mentioned once you load in, you get that Ric Flair-looking wrestler who's not even in the game holding that championship belt. Let's give a shout-out to the people who created this game here. Richard Ditton, Elaine Ditton, Timothy Skelly, David Thiel, and Lonnie Ropp, whose names are right when you load up the game. Now, when you start a game, when you pick who they are, they come up on the screen in these big squares that show the wrestler's face, but then it will also show, like, say, Howling Man Slayer is from Indianapolis, Indiana, 265 pounds, and his quote is, "Scalps? I'm taking heads." And then Xanto Claus, who we say looks like a nice luchador, is actually Freddy Krueger. He's from Parts Unknown. Is that
supposed to be a mask? Or
it's like a cross between Freddy Krueger and what's his name from Shadow of the Silence of the Lambs?
Hannibal Lecter?
Yes. It says that's his catchphrase. So there's something going on with Xanto Claus over here. We're just not sure yet. But when you load in, one of the nicest crowds I've ever seen in a game behind a barricade. And then, of course, the 3/4 turned ring. Now,
so this is the Atari version, I believe, that we're looking at.
I think so, yes.
Yeah, because
they're all pretty similar
compared to the Commodore 64 version. Very different, way more muted colors. The crowd is completely different. All the characters and the presentation are the same, but it looks much more dull.
Yeah, there's just less detail. It's pretty much the same thing you're seeing, but like you said, the colors are better on the Atari, but the Commodore is just duller.
Yeah,
like you don't see the wrinkles in the apron on the Commodore, but you see it on the Atari.
Which is it a very important detail? No, but it's a brightly colored, ring apron that you see the colors and the wrestlers more. Everyone, and I, as graphic designers, I know that we're going to hate this word, but everything kind of pops a little bit more. It's the worst.
No, but
you make the logo like 3 times bigger, John.
Oh, no, but you're right. And it's just those little details that do make this game really nice to look at. And you hate when it's this nice to look at and then the gameplay is just because you kick, you punch, you throw them into the ropes, you drop kick, which is cool. There's a lot of moves here for this old game. And there's a lot of animations.
Look great.
Yeah, like when you're pinning, you hold up the 1, 2, 3 with your hands. When you win, there's like a cool animation, but it's those just the moves take forever. Whipping someone and running.
I think the controls or the controllers are the things that held like this generation of consoles back. It's the thing that I've always had a hard time, and maybe it's just because I grew up with a controller with more buttons. That maybe the limited controllers that a lot of these games had, that it just, you expect it to be able to do more. And it's not that it makes the game bad. It just
slows it down.
Slows it down, and it makes it have a bit of a learning curve because you want to button mash and you want to hit more than one button. But it's, for a lot of these consoles, it's a joystick and a single button.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's just clunky, but it's 1986. What do you expect? We mentioned before, what was the only other game? Pro Wrestling for the Sega Master System. There's not much competition here. I think appearance-wise, gameplay, maybe even, this game did go ahead of its time, did go above and beyond. But did you know? Did you know Championship Wrestling was originally intended as a WWF game, but the license never materialized?
Did you know the manual for this game is available on eBay for $300, while the game itself only goes for $10?
Did you know the complete game ranges from $19.99 to $49.99?
You think that's someone price gouging a manual, maybe?
I would say they're just like, oh, look what I have. Let's see if I can get a sucker to buy it on eBay. Because the manual's available on PDF form online. I downloaded it the other day.
I want you to do something for me really quick. Actually, okay. I want everyone who's listening to this podcast to do this.
Unless you're driving.
Unless you're driving. Don't do that. Or pull over to do this. I want you to Google Pro Wrestling for the Sega Master System.
Doing it.
And I want everyone to compare it to the Atari version of Championship Wrestling.
Now, it's hard to actually find this game unless you type in Atari ST Championship Wrestling.
Yeah.
Because Title Match Wrestling comes up 10 times out of 10 if you just put in Championship Wrestling Atari. So it even comes up when you do that, but you still have the other one in there too. But yeah, crazy eBay prices, but also pretty cool that this could have been a WWF game because Micro League Wrestling came out in 87 for the Amiga and the Commodore 64, but it wasn't really like, it was like a turn-based text game with animations. They could have came out swinging with a real wrestling game right away rather than wait till 89 when WrestleMania came out for the NES.
That's crazy. Like, so obviously Hogan, we talked about Macho. There's a lot of similar likeness to some wrestlers in WWF at the time. But do you still have the picture of Pro Wrestling pulled up?
Yes.
Graphically comparing the two of them, one feels a lot more realistic and one feels a lot more cartoony. Now, if you're looking to play a wrestling game in 86, these are your only two options. Which one are you more likely to go for?
I guess it depends on the console. If you have the Master System or if you have one of these, Atari or Commodore or Apple II.
I just remember being very... surprised isn't the word, but I was just like taken back with how much you can do in pro wrestling. Like there was the outside with the steel chair and stuff, and you could I remember you could torpedo across the ring, and this game has that as well. Championship Wrestling has fun animations and over the top looking moves, and we talked about how great everything looks. But it's just such a crazy comparison to look at these two games for these two consoles and just see the stark differences between them.
You know what? In 30 years, we're going to be saying that about 2K24 and AEW Fight Forever.
That's very, very true. And I wonder if we'll be doing that show then.
Probably, yeah, definitely. But all right, let's sit back. Let's relax. Let's get some R&R, some ratings and reviews. Check out Atari Mania. There's a full article. If you type in Atari Mania Championship Wrestling, there's a nice write-up on this. They give it a 6.7 out of 10. I was able to get a lot of info and graphics for this episode on that one page. That's where I found the PDF of the manual. There's a lot of stuff on there. You could download everything. Game FAQ user rating is a 3.5 out of 5 stars, which means good. The difficulty of 4 out of 5, which is just right. And the length of hours played averages at around 11, which is way more than I would ever consider playing this game. Now, I have a few magazine clippings here as well. This one kind of just says the same thing we read before, the Sultans of Slam, but it shows a nice image of the game with a nice box image of the game with some other stuff as well. So like the popular games that were out in this magazine issue. And then
World Karate Championship. Karate Fighters? What a crazy game.
Yeah, no thanks. I'm good. These are all Epic's games, so they made that as well. The next one shows the Danny DeVito cover rather than the other one. So it's all over the place. But with that, it also shows the prices for the the Commodore 64 was $14.99, and these are European prices. The cassette was $9.99, and the Atari ST was $24.99.
Damn.
For 86, that's, I don't know how many euros that is, but
I feel like that's
I don't know.
I feel like that's still expensive when you adjust for inflation.
Euros to US. Let's see. It's like $2 less than us. So,
all right. Well, that's now, right?
Now, yeah. Who knows what it was then? I'm not about to go dig into that math. George, do you know what time it is?
I don't, but I have a feeling you're going to tell me.
It's time to rate the game.
The game!
All right, Johnny Clash. Championship Wrestling. Will you play it forever? Or future endeavor?
I wish I could give the graphics a play it forever and the appearance and everything a play it forever, but the gameplay is just not it. For an old game, there's no nostalgia. There's nothing pulling me back in that I would want to play this game. So I'm going to say future endeavor.
Okay.
But George, what about you?
Man, I almost feel like it needs to be for per console, because I don't think that I would like to play the Commodore 64 version. But the Atari, I feel like I could go back to. And again, that's just me wanting to play with the one that looks that has the better looking crowd and the better looking colors and everything's a little more flashy. So I think for that and the fact that the animations are kind of cool and you know what we didn't talk about, John?
What?
The sounds.
Oh, those sounds were something.
That is not. That's something that I'm glad got better over time. the counting is nightmares. The stuff of nightmares.
It's pretty brutal. And they're not even just the counting, like the and there was like a hum too.
Yeah. Yeah, the sound leaves a lot to be desired. But with that, I think I'm on the fence over man. Future endeavor.
I really don't see it going any other way.
Yeah.
So a double fuge. We could put this game in the graveyard, never to be seen again. If you've ever played it, if you know about it, let us know. Let us know what your rating might be as well.
Oh, man. Well, John, with that, are you ready to get into this week's soft lock question?
Let's do it.
All right, the Soft Lock is a weekly segment on the podcast where one of our mega marks from our Patreon, is that going to change? Are we not going to call them mega marks anymore? asks us a question, gives us a topic to debate. It's a question of the week with a fancy name. This week, it comes from the best bitch from the Best Batch Promotions, the Elder Spork. And his question is, when it's all said and done, where does the current console generation rank among other console generations?
This is a good one.
Oh, man. So current consoles, we're talking about PS5,
The Xbox One.
S and S.
Yeah, not one.
Switch, I guess, is in there.
Switch is kind of...
It's kind of last gen.
Yeah.
It's like
multi-generational.
The OLED. And, yeah, I don't know. Man. Where does it rank amongst the other?
So,
what's your best generation?
I'm going to say the 360 PS3 generation. Because we all know PS2, GameCube, Xbox, they were great. But PS3 and 360, I feel like took it up a notch. And that could be generational. That could be whatever. I love my PS4. I played it a long time, had it a long time. I feel like Xbox One, until the Game Pass came out, just didn't hit as good as the PS4. But the 360 had bangers. PS3 had bangers. They were actual like game changers. As far as games, as far as online gaming, as far as being called multiple names in Call of Duty lobbies, like that was peak.
I'm very surprised that for some reason I just thought that you were immediately going to go with PlayStation 1 and N64.
They were good. They were great. I mean, they're a lot of people's favorites, but were they the best? Did they change much? I mean, from coming from what, Super Nintendo and Sega to that, yeah, that was a big step up. There was also the Dreamcast. There was a Sega Saturn. It was just messy. There was just a lot of stuff going on. Now, I mean, we're at the point where what's going to make now, like this generation, better? I feel like it's going to be just VR stuff. Because the PS5, the Xbox Series S and X are just like flawless consoles.
And it really is the leap in online play as well.
Yeah.
You don't need adapters to play online with the PlayStation 3 and the 360 like you did with the PS2.
Yeah. Which is cool because at least you got it back in that era. But man.
I am inclined to agree with you because there are so many great games, and I was torn between PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 generation, and Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo.
Those are great. Those are great too. It's really, that's your opinion. That's my opinion. Like it's.
I think
we don't have to agree on this.
No, I know that we don't, but just thinking of how PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 changed like the course of gaming in the sense of like online play, and DLC didn't always need to be. I mean, DLC in itself, like that's wild. It wasn't like a.
If you think about it, not everyone had the internet back then.
Yeah.
Or it was like dial-up, which is crazy.
Do you remember when, like, the first time that you got, like, cable internet and you got to go online and, like, not have to make sure that someone wasn't on the phone?
My black Windows XP PC that had, like, the biggest monitor you've ever seen in your life. Not screen-wise. It just went back.
Tube monitors, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. I think the consensus of me and John is PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. And do you think that generation is better or worse than the current generation?
Like I said, you can't get better than what we're getting right now. Games look great. They play great. There's still some issues with games launching without being completed, but there's patches. I mean,
we had that with N64 games.
We didn't have patches in N64. So where does this current generation rank? It's up there, but I wouldn't put it at the very top. It's only up from here.
I mean, like we said earlier, you thinking 20, 30 years, we may look back and be like, man,
still can't get a PS5.
Yeah, but you don't know. Like we joke, but it may be like, man, we didn't know what we had at the time. Like, think about it. Where in 20, 30 years, what are Spider-Man games going to look like? Like, we both love the Spider-Man video games. Like, could you imagine what they're going to look like in like 5 generations of consoles?
That's a little nuts to think about.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But hey, let us know what you think about where current consoles rank among the legacy of consoles. And you can let us know on all forms of social media at GameMarksPod. But John, let the people at home know what we're playing next week.
Next week, we're going to go back and remaster an older episode from year 1 on the podcast back to 2019. Man. But we're redoing it. We're building it from the ground up. Saturday Night Slam Masters makes its return.
The best. I remember very much enjoying this game. This game was actually a recommendation from my friend that said if we didn't play it, he was never going to listen to the podcast again. And me and John love that game, and hopefully it holds up. And happy to take a trip down memory lane. But with that, John, is it time for us to put a bow on this?
That's it. Wrap it up.
All right, guys, youtube.com/GameMarksPodcast for video versions of this lovely show, and as well as all of our gameplay footage and everything else. GMP24 live on there. GMP64 is on there. And make sure to go over to GameMarksPod.com/shop for all of our exclusive merchandise. ProWrestlingTees.com/GameMarksPod for our shirts. Patreon.com/GameMarksPod. That is changing soon, but we will have to update that when the time comes. But for now, you can get early and ad-free versions of this podcast, access to show notes, the live recording, and a whole lot more at GameMarksPod on all forms of social media. And please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, ring that notification bell, and leave us a 5-star rating and a review for this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you choose to listen to your podcasts. And if you have a product or service that you'd like to advertise on this podcast, please reach out to us at GameMarksPod@gmail.com. And do not forget to check out Going Postal and State of Affairs, all a part of the Pod Exchange collective group of podcasts. It's not a network. We got to figure out what we're calling it. But with that, John, 2 things. 1, that was a chef's kiss bell ring. It was beautiful, crisp, and clean. And whenever you're ready, sir, do that thing.
Game over, Marks.
Game Marks Podcast, put them on the radar. Playing rare games, Sega Saturn, no game shard. Johnny and George work hard and they play hard. Future endeavor games and put them in the graveyard. From the deep dive to the clash at the feast. How can I get more? That's question of the week. Follow on Twitch, there's nothing that they won't play. Game Marks Podcast every single Monday.